Hey everyone, my name is Rich, and this is episode number 51 of Rich Talks Records, though today we won't really be talking about records so much as we will be talking about, films kind of, but artistry mostly. And that is, this is going to be basically a tribute video to David Lynch, who died about now a week and a half ago. And I thought about how I wanted to do this. I have never done a memorial episode before. I thought about doing one after Wayne Kramer passed away, and I really came close to doing one when Gary Floyd of the Dicks died. But I didn't... I just, for various reasons, chose not to do that. But yeah, David Lynch passed away. Now, I would have done this sooner, but the last couple weeks I've been I've really been in my own world. And the news of Lynch passing away, I mean, we had heard that he was sick, but I sort of put that a little bit on the back burner. And now that kind of the little phase I was in, I was really immersed in creative work and just not kind of isolated from the outer world as one needs to do sometimes. So I kind of compartmentalized Lynch's passing, but I knew that he was sick. So it didn't come as a horrible shock, but I feel like this is just a good opportunity to discuss and maybe Lynch himself would appreciate this, I dare say, the ripple effects that his creativity and his art life made over here, the ripple effects, mine way the hell over here. Lynch, there's a few of them in my life, like a John Lennon or a Bob Dylan, or a David Bowie. There's a few. I mean, I could probably name names all day, but Lynch is one of those people that's just kind of in my DNA, and is, if you've watched my other videos, is just a perpetual reference point for me. So, and it started young, and it has just sort of been there now for really kind of about 35-ish years. So, I thought that, and part of the ripple effect is, and unfortunately I couldn't find it. I feel a little bit dopey that I couldn't find it, but David Lynch's incredible book, Catching the Big Fish, that was something like a guide manual for me, starting around 06, 07, and then for several years after that. It doesn't surprise me that I couldn't find it, because every couple of years I change work bags, like the bag that has my computer and my pens and notebooks and stuff. I swap stuff out. It doesn't surprise me that it's somewhere in one of those, somewhere in my office or in storage or something. But it is well read, because I would consult it in the ways that people like throw the I Ching. I would consult Catching the Big Fish. It is a phenomenal manual for creative work and for coming up with jumping off points. And really, while I never got into transcendental meditation specifically, Lynch and the unified field stuff, like I read I read two Stephen Hawking books about the unified field, and that stuff really informs a lot of my thinking and is very, very important to me. So I really thought about all the different ways in which I could talk about Lynch, and what I decided not to do was like a ranking, or I decided not to really do an analysis. One of the most kind of fascinating things about David Lynch is I think that he is like the most documented filmmaker that has ever been. There have been so many documentaries about him. There have been so many special features about him. For a guy who doesn't or didn't explain his work, my God, there's so much footage of him working, specifically working, and it is amazing because when you think of other people, when you think of Pasolini or Fellini, you know, Orson Welles, like there's not a ton of footage of them. There's like still photos of Godard. I mean, there's not a lot that actually captures the process, and it's funny for somebody who refused to explain himself and explain his work, just how much first-hand footage there is of him actually making decisions and moving forward. It is really interesting, and kind of it's not a contradiction, but it's funny. But I thought about it. I didn't want to do an analysis, and he is so like well covered in what his intentions are and were, all of that. So what I decided to do was focus a little bit on sort of more of my personal history with him. And one of the things I will say about Lynch is, like Bob Dylan or like Prince, I eventually came to some sort of point where I realized that I don't know that he necessarily ever had bad ideas. And really, some of the things that I like more than others, or some of the things that resonated with me more than others, really is just a matter of the realization and the completeness of those ideas. So I've come to the point where I don't know now that Dylan ever really wrote a bad song. There might only be like two. Honestly, I'm fairly convinced at this point. I've heard him transform songs into something truly astonishing on stage. Songs that I never cared about on record, and I've seen it happen like in person. So anyway, the one thing I will say about Lynch that I do find fascinating, and yes, the eagle-eyed among you will notice that there are two films that are not up here. One is Eraserhead. I can't find Eraserhead. I don't know where it is. I cleared off. I have all my movies on shelves right over yonder here, and I have Director's Row. So Lynch takes up about that much of Director's Row. I have a couple duplicates that I didn't put up here, but we'll get to the movie that I'm going to be talking about the most. But one of the things that I thought was funny was, for instance, I saw Fire Walk with Me maybe like a year after it came out, and I didn't understand it to save my life. I utterly did not understand it. And then I saw Lost Highway in the theater, which I did not care for. I did not like Lost Highway. But I started to understand Fire Walk with Me through Lost Highway. It was a little weird. And I went back a couple years later, maybe it was on cable or something, and I rewatched Blue Velvet and started to understand Fire Walk with Me better, and consequently Lost Highway. And then Mulholland Drive, where is it? There it is, made me really understand Lost Highway. I started thinking Lost Highway was a masterpiece after that. But then this opus, this overlooked masterpiece, which I think people have started really getting into, Inland Empire, I saw that in the theater. Laura Dern's face on the big screen, the shot. I thought that's the most scared I've ever been in a theater. That was utterly terrifying. It was like the movie was coming out at me. But Inland Empire, I already thought Mulholland Drive was a masterpiece, but Inland Empire made me love Mulholland Drive even more, which made me love Lost Highway even more, which made me love on and on and on. So there's a weird thing all the way back to the original Big Bang of Eraserhead. And eventually I just started to realize, it doesn't surprise me that Inland Empire ends the way that it does, with the big number and characters from some of the other movies. It doesn't surprise me that it ends that way, because it's sort of like each of these are not that it's one contained universe necessarily, but that there are there are interconnections in these larger stories. And Inland Empire was sort of the summation of everything for Lynch for me, because there was a lot of echoing back to Eraserhead, and it was this resounding major final opus, because he was saying at the time that it was going to be his last film, right? And then, goddamn it, no. Those echoes and reverberations and extensions and his ability to just keep pulling, and the analogy of the goose with the golden eggs, those golden eggs just kept going, and we wind up with the even mega opus. So the way I sort of look at it is like Inland Empire is like the summation of Earth. And then this is like the summation of the universe. Like he somehow pulled back that much further and then made an even more magnum opus. So these are the two monumental long form works at the end of his life. I always sort of felt like it would be like if Zappa had lived another 10 years or something and then made a record beyond Civilization Phase 3, that's sort of like what Twin Peaks Season 3 is, that it's this like pulling all the way back and making even more and more and more connections and expansions of the universe. So that's Lynch to me. I mean, I to me, he really is the supreme artist, But the movie that I'm going to be focusing on for today, that I really want to talk about, the one that is, of all of these films, and of all of the things about him, I eat quinoa all the time because of David Lynch. Like, David Lynch affected my diet. That is it in the extras for here? The quinoa scenes with him cooking at home? That alone. David Lynch talking about tap water made me appreciate drinking water more. I'm not kidding. That's the sort of seismic impact that he had on me. It doesn't surprise me that I didn't drop everything I was doing when he died, or the day or day after, because I think it's taken me a few days for all of it to register. So anyway, the movie that I really want to talk about, the one that is the closest to my heart of all of this, 1990s Wild at Heart, a movie that a lot of people don't appreciate or consider one of his lesser works. And I don't think it is one of his lesser works, and I'm gonna get into all of that. It's the one that means the most to me, and I'm gonna talk about that. I feel like out of all of Lynch's films, maybe The Straight Story also qualifies. Can I, by the way, just take a minute and mention The Straight Story? I've only ever watched The Straight Story 2 times, and I welled up nearly the whole length of the movie both times. The only reason I haven't watched it more is because I just can't take it. Richard Farnsworth's performance is unbelievable. The Straight Story is one of the true quiet masterpieces of David Lynch's body of work. It is his world gone wrong, if you will. This, or maybe I don't know, his John Wesley Harding. Just this masterpiece that's just sort of out there, that doesn't draw attention to itself as a magnum opus, because it's not really going for that, and yet it proves just how incredible he was. Another funny thing about The Straight Story, since I'm on it, and I think you're getting kind of the idea that this video is gonna go a little here and go a little there. But that's what we do, goddammit, here at Rich Talks Records. So, but The Straight Story, it was always a funny thing. Like, I've talked about my father before, and I always say that my father was the most conservative man I ever met. He was if there was a way to be conservative about something, no matter how small or insignificant in life, he figured out a way to do it. And in that way, even though I disagreed with him vehemently on a number of things, by the time I was in my 30s, goddammit, I had to have respect for it, because it had unbelievable continuity. But there was a thing that my dad had watched about Pablo Picasso, and my father hated Pablo Picasso because of course he does, right? And there was a this thing. I don't know if it was a documentary or a fictional portrayal. I don't know what it was that he was watching, but in it, Picasso very quickly with a sketch pad does kind of a thumbnail sketch, literally, I guess, of the styles of the old master painters, right? And my dad didn't know that Picasso could draw in any kind of traditional or tutored sense. And in that 30 seconds or whatever, my father, on a dime, turned and now loved Pablo Picasso because he had talent, because he could do it actually. The thing about Lynch, and there's always that thing, like, oh, can they do it without the weird stuff? Or could they do it without the bells and whistles? All that sort of stuff, right? The thing about Lynch, and there's validity to that critique sometimes. I think, can they do it without the bells and whistles? That is not wholly invalid, right? Because Milli Vanilli couldn't, to use an extreme example, right? But Lynch could. Lynch could, and The Straight Story is the proof that it didn't have to be weird. David Lynch could do a conventional, like, plot-driven, deep character study film that is purely classically beautiful in every possible way. I love The Straight Story, and I think it's a major work. But anyway, I think of all of his films, I think there are sort of two that don't, other than The Straight Story, I guess, that don't really sort of draw attention to themselves as sort of major works. I feel like he's one of the rare people, kind of like a Kubrick, where nearly every film is a major work, right? Except for The Elephant Man, which has grown in stature over time, and then this one. I feel like these two are sort of in some sort of permanent B tier that I want to break them out of a little bit. So anyway, I am now going to go on about Wild at Heart. So, 1990, I was 12 years old, and I have constantly referenced this in sort of my private life. I talk about how I was living in cultural oblivion in 1990, and it really was. I was largely friendless and truly alone. I would see my parents in the evenings, but I mostly lived with my grandmother. My grandmother would more or less go to bed at 8 o'clock. That is to say, she would shut the door and to her bedroom and pray the rosary until she fell asleep. So that was, and you couldn't turn on lights in the house because God provides the light, right? So I kind of lived alone in darkness. And what I would do is, starting at some point in the evening, I would eat, or after I would eat dinner, I would go upstairs and listen to music. So, by 1990, it was The Doors. It was the first two Doors albums and Rolling Stones Aftermath. And I sort of talked about this phase a little bit in my Rolling Stones video. So I was just, and I would read, and I was really, really way in my own world, right? So, but the sense of cultural oblivion was real. That where the kids at school seemed like they were coming into the world and coming into being, I felt like I was going out of being, and I just kind of felt more and more invisible all the time. I had been bullied before that. By 1990, like, I wasn't even getting bullied. I would get made fun of here and there, but I was off the radar of even that, and I had started acting out to sort of keep people away. So I would sort of pull these like weird party pieces to sort of freak people out. And like I did this thing where I would chew on a box cutter, and it was like, without cutting myself, right? And that was like one of my like, ooh, you don't want to mess with me, I'm crazy. And the jocks at all would keep at arm's length from me. So that summer of 1990 was, I feel like, the sort of, some sort of like weird breaking point. I had a friend who lived out here in the summers. It would stay with his dad. The rest of the year he was with his mom in California. And there was a movie theater that was like, I don't know, Jesus, it was a long walk. I don't know what it was, 2 miles, 4 miles, I don't know. It was a long walk. It would take us a while to get there. And to get to the movie theater, you had to walk across what was the next year going to be turned into a parking lot. But at that point, it was all just dirt. So we had to traverse this massive, like, football field of just dirt that would, like, be blowing around. And so by the time you would get to the movie theater, you'd be gross and matted with dirt and sweat. And we would watch, I don't know how many times I saw this in the theater, 4 or 5, 6 times, I don't know, the Bill Murray movie Quick Change. And I was obsessed with Quick Change. And it had gotten really middling reviews. It wasn't doing very well. And the only people in the theater were me and my friend. And we would go and watch Quick Change. And on these, like, endless, ridiculous, slow afternoons. And the preview before Quick Change was the New Kids on the Block 1990 Magic Summer Tour ad for the Coca-Cola Magic Summer Tour. And we were not having a magical summer. We were dispossessed, isolated, angry youth. And we would have our popcorn and stuff, and it was always just us in the theater, and we would just fucking yell and throw shit at the screen, and I would just yell like, "Fuck you, Donnie!" It's like I threw, "You suck, Jordan!" And I would just throw shit at the New Kids, right? And then we would watch Quick Change, which temperamentally, Bill Murray's character in Quick Change was sort of where I was at in life. I was the 12-year-old version. And like Bill Murray in the clown outfit, that's how I fucking felt. I didn't feel cool, right? I felt like a fucking clown. I felt like a fucking clown at school. I didn't like how I dressed. I was in the process of transforming myself and changing myself at that time. And I was in the process of getting myself out of the mud that I had been buried in, and it was the beginning of really like forging my own self-esteem and all of that shit, and so towards the end of the time, I actually had to look up the release date, but Wild at Heart came out. Now, I had barely seen Twin Peaks. I was vaguely aware of Twin Peaks. I saw little clips of it. There was no goddamn way that it was ever going to get watched in my house. I think, we had seen Dune, and my dad hated Dune. And that was it for David Lynch, for my dad. So if my dad, I wouldn't have known about Blue Velvet until I was in high school. So, Twin Peaks sort of was a thing, but it came and went. And really the lasting piece of ephemera for me with Twin Peaks was, I'll be honest, was Sherilyn Fenn, who was the ultimate woman. Sherilyn Fenn to 12-year-old me was the apex of femininity. And and this is where things start to tie in. The thing about Lynch and the thing about Wild at Heart and seeing like the previews for Wild at Heart, right, was it was part of a thing that started happening for me around that time. The other apex of femininity and womanhood was Laura San Giacomo in Sex, Lies, and Videotape, right? And that was another one. She would come on the TV screen, and I would just be like aghast that there was a woman that fucking much of a vision, right? And there was this thing that was sort of happening that I was getting it was sort of like seeing over the wall, right? It was just like these weird little peaks over the wall, that there was something happening over there somewhere that I couldn't quite get to. And that I only was very getting pieces of the dim signals, so to speak, right? So Twin Peaks and Wild at Heart was one of those, okay? The Jane's Addiction video for Stop was another one. That pool party with like people with blue hair with wearing inner tubes for hats and all that crazy shit, like, and playing with the finger puppets on the beach and all of that. That was another big one. That was another like, oh my God, what's happening? Another one, which is kind of funny, but like 12-year-old boy, the Divinals I Touch Myself video. Okay, Christina Amphlett, Sherilyn Fenn, Laura San Giacomo, like, I think you get the idea, right? So that was another like, wow, like what's going on over there? I really want to know, right? And then I would see stuff like on television about like Jeff Koons. And Jeff Koons and David Lynch were weirdly one and the same for me. Like these guys who were like seemingly super normal and super straight, but like, you know, Chickalina and then, right, Sherilyn Fenn and et cetera, right? So I was very, 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 very curious about that. A couple years later, another part of that would be Richard Kern. This is his opus New York Girls, right? Like, so Richard Kern was another part of that. So like, I would have found out about Kern about a year and a half later, and Kern was another one of like, that sort of forged itself into my brain as well. But the really, really big one was Robert Mapplethorpe. So Robert Mapplethorpe and Jeff Koons and Perry Farrell and David Lynch were like the four horsemen of, hey, there's a world other than this, right? And then you sort of factor in the Public Enemies and the NWAs and the Ghetto Boys, right? And there starts to be this like, you know, plus all the other stuff I liked, like Suicidal Tendencies and getting into like Slayer and stuff, right? So, and I already was like super into the Doors and all the other stuff I was into, right? So all of these things sort of formed together. I got this on a date with my first girlfriend in 1992. I just want to throw this in on a funny note. And part of the reason I was interested in Mapplethorpe too, well, I'll get to that in a second. The funny little story. We stopped at Portillo, so my parents picked my girlfriend and I up. I had this in the bag. And my dad goes, can I see that book? He must have heard of Robert Mapplethorpe on the news. We'll get to that in a second. And he flips through this for a second, right? And he sees what he sees, sees the things that you would see in a Robert Mapplethorpe book. Never mind the fact that I was with my girlfriend and they had no idea what the hell we were getting up to, right? But my dad like looks at it, and then for like the next like 3 months he was convinced I was gay and like wanted to send me to like one of those conversion camps and shit. And I was like, I couldn't tell him the reality, but, you know, because then I also would have gotten in trouble, but I was supposed to apparently just stay asexual until I, like, was magically hetero at 18 on my birthday, right? And, like, I want to go procreate, but no. So I had to, like, explain to him that, no, I very much like girls. Do you see the girl right over there in line buying a hamburger for me? But I was super, super, super into Robert Mapplethorpe and still am. I was a fucking genius. Another glimpse over the wall to tie together with Wild at Heart was this. Yes, this is the single that I got in 1990, Chris Isaak's Wicked Game. I did have the Divinals album, which the cassette broke at some point, so I pitched it. So unfortunately, because otherwise I'd pulled that out. But this, of course, is featured in Wild at Heart, and this blew up like a year later with the Helena Christensen reshoot of the video. I didn't like that. I didn't think that was cool. The David Lynch video for this, with them playing with the deep shadows and the clips of the movie and the match striking the oh my God. That video, that was a late night classic. What I used to do back then as a weird friendless kid was I would tape hours and 6-hour tapes. I would record stuff off television, and I would basically make mixtapes off the television. So like bands I wasn't allowed to buy, like if there was a Slayer video, like I would tape all of Headbangers Ball if they said they were going to play like Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast, or if they said they were going to play like a Black Sabbath, right? Like stuff that my parents wouldn't let me buy. I would record 6 hours and just sort of hope I would get lucky and then tape over the stuff I didn't like. So I have, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 of these VHS mixtape things I would make. And this was a favorite. Every time this was on TV, I would try and catch it so that I could, that it would come up. And I would just watch these things for my own sort of amusement or whatever, right? And it was all sorts of crazy stuff, you know? So anyway, so Wicked Game and the you know, the lust and the intensity of it and the darkness of it. This was all, you know, that all made sense with me. That was all part of this, whatever you want to call, gestalt that was forming in my mind, that there was this beautiful, beautiful, exciting world out there. So we used to get the paper, and the Sunday paper had its own version of TV Guide. It had the TV listings for the week. And that was a very big deal because that was how, so by this point I was rating my dad's movie books, and I was well into the phase of my life where I was, the other thing, Jesus, see, the other thing about Mapplethorpe, or do I want to get into that? Well, I'll just say it here, and then we'll come back to this. The thing about Mapplethorpe was the bête noire of Jesse Helms and the funding for the National Endowment for the Arts, right? So that would be something that would totally be in the crosshairs of with my dad's conservatism, because Robert Mapplethorpe, maybe he was dead by that point, I think, but he was the bad guy, you know. So that was a part of it. That by even showing interest, gay or not, in Mapplethorpe, you were sort of putting yourself on the bad list, right? Or being interested in Jeff Koons was similar. And so anyway, I don't know at what point. So apparently, Wild at Heart's theatrical run it came out in August of 1990. So I've tried to think about, for this video, I tried to reconstruct what the timeline would have been when I first saw it. But I saw it on cable one night, and I want to say it was on Showtime. And it was one of those things where it's going to be like 11 o'clock on a Friday. So I had to stay up late and tell my parents, oh, there's this thing I want to watch. And I had to lie and say it was like about baseball or something. It was like I had to make up something because I couldn't say, oh, I want to go watch this David Lynch movie, right? So this was still at a time in my life where if my parents knew that there were exposed breasts in a movie, I had to make a verbal promise where I would look them in the eyes and tell them that I will look away when the boobs come on screen. Like, that is the household that I was raised in. So anyway, so I had to come up with this stupid cover story, and it was the thing I was thinking about all week. I'm gonna fucking see Wild at Heart, and oh my god, I can't believe this, you know. And it was like vibrating through me that I was gonna see this movie. And it was kind of like when I did finally get to hear Ritual de lo Habitual for the first time, which would have been right around the same time. I think Ritual was like a month or two after. But I'm thinking that this would have been end of 1990, beginning of 1991. I want to say December of 90, January of 91, somewhere in there, I would have to say. And it kind of like with Ritual de lo Habitual, it turned everything upside down. I mean, it really was. I went to school a different person after that. It was one of the things that changed how I walked, changed how I carried myself. I think that I had gotten so used to being like the loser, and the dork, that I really in the couple of years before this, I really was playing into that. So I would make kind of stupid sort of yuck kind of jokes, and you know, and kind of well, maybe they'll bother me less if I'm like sort of like a cornball, like like what's the word, borscht belt comedian or something. Like if I sort of do that, maybe they'll lay off of me because I'll just be like zany and that'll be enough, you know. But like by this point, like there were these things that were very, very, very transformative to me, and like the Doors were very transformative to me, and like Morrison was transformative, and Brian Jones was transformative. Like it wasn't that in the eyes of other people that I was less of a dork or less of a loser or something like that, but it was that I was defining my own version of cool. I was defining my own aesthetics. I was building my own world, you know, and it wasn't reactive to dipshits at school who fucking liked CNC Music Factory. I mean, like, literally, one of the kids that gave me the most problems, his favorite song was The King of Wishful Thinking, right? So I had the confidence to be like, yeah, fuck that song, it sucks. Whereas I never would have said that in '88, right? I don't care. I don't care. Do what you're gonna do. I don't care. And that became my vibe. And Wild at Heart played a huge role in that. My belief in, or my sense of individuality and belief in personal freedom came from between Ritual de lo Habitual and Wild at Heart. Every single thing about Wild at Heart was perfect to me. The fact that I was getting into speed metal and thrash and everything, but I loved, and I've talked about this before, I loved the Everly Brothers, I loved Buddy Holly, I loved Fats Domino. So the idea that the thrash band goes into an Elvis song made all the sense in the world to me. The idea that, well, first of all, that it was that song, Love Me, my single favorite Elvis performance ever. And that Nicolas Cage was so goddamn good at it. And Nicolas Cage, so during this period, I started to say this was when I was going to the video store, going through my dad's old movie books and renting, like, I was just going down the list. I was seeing every single movie that Marlon Brando had been in. And then I was watching every single movie in trying to do chronological order that Robert De Niro had been in, and on and on and on, right? And Nicolas Cage, weirdly, was like my man during this time. Nicolas Cage was the mark of quality. And I actually had pulled up his filmography because to highlight some big favorites at the time. So there was Raising Arizona, one of the best fucking movies ever made, and I was obsessed with, especially the ending. Moonstruck was like a movie I could watch with my parents, so that was a cool way to see Nicolas Cage, plus he's awesome in it. But there was Wild at Heart. There was, just after this period, Zandali, if you've never seen Zandali. And then, the other one I really loved, Vampire's Kiss, right? And no one, I can tell you, nobody was renting Vampire's Kiss. So that, anytime I wanted to see that, there it was, like, for the taking. So, Nicolas Cage was my man. He was this ultimate, like, can't believe I'm using this word, fucking balls out, like, fearless guy who would just go for it. And fully committed, and yet at the same time, like, funny as hell, because he's also smart. Everything about this movie was perfect to me. Everything about it. All of the iconography. The fact that Sherilyn Fenn was in it. The fact that Crispin Glover was in it, and I'm also going to say, if you have never seen What Is It, or oh god damn it, now I'm forgetting the name of the other one. He never finished the trilogy of films. I don't know that they've ever been properly released. But if you've never seen the Crispin Glover movies, What Is It and It Is Mine? I forget the name of the other one, damn it. Go hunt those down. Someone has to have uploaded them by now somewhere. Those are some of the greatest movies ever made. Those are some of my favorite movies ever made. A movie podcast I really like, the Low Res Wonder Bread, did a review of it not that long ago, and I had to click out of it because they were the one guy was not having it and kind of had a bum take on those movies and just how awesome those movies are. No, those movies are fucking amazing. Saw them in the theater with Crispin Glover sitting right behind me. So that was pretty cool too, because like there he was, like, and I fucking love Crispin Glover. That's my fucking man. So like this was just like, it was like this conglomeration. Like I already loved Crispin Glover. I loved Sherilyn Fenn. Like I didn't really know yet the depth of like Harry Dean Stanton. Like there was, you know, Laura Dern, fucking come on. Like Laura Dern's a fucking genius. Like amazing. Like perfect cast, perfect iconography. The way it is shot, everything about it. It is so dense and insane and bonkers and lust-filled and driven and mad, and it made all the sense with my Doors albums and with Ritual de lo Habitual and what I could see of Jeff Koons stuff. Like, it made all the sense in the world to me. Like, it resonated with me completely, okay? So, but specifically, the scene... So, and this is where I guess I will loosely tie the Jesse Helms thing in. The burgeoning of my political consciousness, as such I have one, was the Gulf War. And I didn't really understand the Gulf War, but I did not like the Gulf War. And it was part of what was very alien to me about the Gulf War was how excited the kids at school were about it, including one kid who actually turned to me and said excitedly that the stock market has never been higher. Actually, it was just before history class started, first social studies, first class of the day. It was like, I was like, these fucking kids are fucking like Reagan Bush automatons. Like, holy shit, they are controlled. As shit as the Rock and Roll High School sequel was with one of the Coreys, I forget which one, the fact that they were like goofing on the Gulf War and Reagan Bush was enough for me to watch that movie more than once. Yes, I watched it more than once. Yes, it sucked, but I got it. So truly high art, low art, right? So, so the scene where Laura Dern is flipping through the radio, and it's just more and more bad news. Now, it doesn't, the Gulf War, I don't think, had begun yet. But that sort of proliferation of horrible, horrible news, horrible, horrible things. And then she just, like, runs out of the car. Like, she can't take it anymore. She feels completely detached from this world. She doesn't understand this world. And they put on the, you know, Power Mad and dance about in the field, in the wheat field. Nicolas Cage and Laura Dern dancing in the wheat field after being driven crazy by the news reports, and I've never heard so much shit in my life. That was me. That was my life. That was what I wanted to do with a girlfriend. I wanted to get a girlfriend and do that. That's what I wanted. That was the sum total of existence for me. Okay? I wanted to be Nicolas Cage with Laura Dern. And honestly, I kind of tried to model me and my first girlfriend after that in a way. We were a cutesier alt-rock version of that. But that was what I, like, that one scene, when I would be sitting in school and, you know, the teacher, like, this happened, would literally be telling us that he has seen, you know, he's taught thousands of kids and he's seen them come and go, and there's nobody here who's ever going to amount to anything. This is a real thing that happened. And, like, looking at all of us and saying, none of you are remarkable. None of you are going to achieve anything. I can tell each and every single one of you what your lives are going to consist of. I can tell you, each and every one of you, what the next 20 years of your life will be. That was school. That was school. The teacher that lost her mind screaming at me in front of everyone because I wouldn't go up and do a rap version of a nursery rhyme of like a Mother Goose story and turn it into a rap because kids like rap now. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I refuse to go up there. And her, you know, I mean, her hitting herself in the head and screaming at me that, you know, and like hissing at me about what an awful person I was. You know, That's what I was thinking about. I was thinking about Wild at Heart. Wild at Heart made all the sense in the world to me. In the same way, speaking of John Lennon from before, that John Lennon said, that he liked rock and roll because rock and roll was real and nothing else was. Well, rock and roll and this was real when nothing else was. Some grown woman hitting herself in the head, and spit flying out of her mouth because I won't rap a nursery rhyme. That's very surreal. That's weird. This made sense, man. I got this. Every single thing about it was perfect. Every single thing about it. It was so exciting and edge of the seat, and it meant the world to me, and it defined me at a very, very, very important time in my life. And now we will jump forward. And we will jump forward to 2015, where I've talked about this phase before. This was the divorce years, dun dun dun. And nothing was working, and I've gone through all that before. And I'm not gonna cry. I swear. But, I had gone to my therapist, God bless her, and I gave her a date. It was 15 months in the future. And I said, if things are not better by this date, that's it. I'm out. This isn't this isn't like a meaningless threat. I'm not trying to get attention. I'm not like, this is real. And there's a date on the calendar, and we have work to do. There are these things that have to improve, because I cannot continue to survive like this. So looking at myself from outside, I thought, like, this is like this kid's just he's losing the fight, and he's getting beaten up in every round, and he won't go down. But like his cheekbone's broken, his nose is broken, he's, like cuts, he's, staggering around, the ref won't call it. And the way I saw myself is as an act of mercy, I have to put a stop to this, and like, it just can't go on. Nothing works. And everything that had worked in my adult life up until that point, by that point, didn't work, and hadn't worked for a few years. And so I sort of spill all this out with my therapist. God bless her. She was like, okay, what's the first thing we're working on? Like, because I'd been seeing her for a couple months at that point, and I was better in that I had stabilized a little bit, so I was a little more functional, but I needed fucking help, and I couldn't do it on my own. I couldn't figure out how to do it on my own. So she took it seriously. Now I've tried to think about the timeline of this, and I don't know what it was, but it was either that night. And I would have been seeing her, I think, on Wednesdays back then. It was Tuesdays or Wednesdays. And it was either that night or the next night. It happened during a weeknight where I had to go to work the next day. But one of those nights, it was that week, I'm at home, and this is after I'd seen my therapist. So it was either that night or a day or two later, whatever it was. And when, after dinner, Wild at Heart is on. And I hadn't seen it. At that point, I had seen it in the theater in maybe like 2008 or 9, maybe. And I'd watched it a few times in the later 90s, early 2000s. But I hadn't seen it in a little while at that point. I saw it in the theater, I think, when I saw it it was either 07, 08, or 09, somewhere in there. I saw it in the theater. I loved it. But it was a little bit more like nostalgic for me at that point, and not like as visceral. And so it's 2015, nothing's working. Doesn't seem like anything's gonna be working anytime soon. And I watched the movie. And we get to the end, and I've quoted this before in other videos. It's a big deal in my life. Cheryl Lee appears and says to say, he's walking away from lauradern and their son. I can't. I'm a manslaughterer, and I forget the other, but and I never had any parental guidance. I never had any parental guidance is one of the greatest fucking lines. Love it. And she says, I'm wild at heart, and she says the most important thing I have heard in my life in the last 10 years, the single best thing I've seen or heard is, if you're truly wild at heart, you'll fight for your dreams. Don't turn away from love. And that, I couldn't believe, I mean, obviously I knew that was in the movie, but there was something about it. It was like that was beaming straight from the universe into me. And, I was numb at that time. And it was like, that was like the first thing that had gotten through to me in years at that point. And my head was spinning around. I go to work the next day, and it was kind of like back in 8th grade, where I felt different, and I wasn't sure what it meant, and I couldn't really understand or define how I felt different, other than I felt different. And I used to go every day to the Walgreens, because I would eat my lunch. I would buy a bag of chips and get some juice, and that would be my sad little lunch at Walgreens. And there were 3 women that worked at Walgreens. There was the woman who'd had a corporate job and who now was sort of downsizing, getting ready for retirement. She was nice, but she always wanted to talk shop with me, and I just wanted to have my lunch break. And then there was the angry older lady who was crazy and who was battling the world and expected you to join her battle for the time that you were in line at the checkout with her. And then there was a woman that I affectionately named Blom. She was an older lady, and Blom stood for Black Mom. She was an older black lady, and she was extremely, extremely matronly and extremely, extremely kind to me. And she only ever called me Richard, and she was like, how are you today, Richard? And she was very doting and very kind. And when I would walk in and I would see Blom, I would think, oh, thank God, she's here. So anyway, on this day, I go in there, and there's Blom, and I was having a bad time, and she could see that. I'd been buying lunches from her for years at that point. And she said, "Are you doing okay, Richard?" And I just sort of looked up at her, and I was like, oh, I don't know. And she fucking says, "Richard, don't ever turn away from love." What? What did you just say? 12 hours or whatever after I've watched this movie? What did you just say? I didn't say that. I was like, yeah, you're right. But inside I'm like, what the fuck? She just said, don't turn away from love. Priest friend of the family. A month later, I said to him, I was like, what the fuck? I was like, did I experience something? I haven't been able to stop thinking about this since it happened. And all he said to me was, the Holy Spirit works in mysterious ways, Rich. And I was like, and he wouldn't elaborate further, of course. And I was like, I guess it does. I guess it does. So don't turn away from love. That's a weird synchronicity. That feels weird and cosmic. It feels unified field. It feels downright Lynchian. And here I am. Here I am a decade later. So it's my little tribute to one of the greatest artists of the 20th and I guess 21st century, because we got this. So, you know, and this, my goodness. So yeah, so that's I guess my thoughts or my tribute to David Lynch. There's a million other things I could say about him. There's a million other things I could quote about him. I didn't even talk about Blue Velvet, my God. Yeah. So anyway, that's my tribute to David Lynch. I hope that you enjoy this in some sort of way. And otherwise, I am working on the Public Image Limited videos. They will be up soon. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, you know, I would appreciate if you would like and subscribe and leave a comment. What are your favorite Lynch films? What do you love about Lynch? How did Lynch affect you? I would love to hear it. I think that would be a really beautiful thing to have going down in the comments. So anyway, I will see you all very soon with Public Image Limited in 1980. Until next time, I will see you all later. Bye!